Hello, my name is Vicky Feldman and I'm a product manager in Oracle Public Sector Revenue Management suite of products, and in this tutorial we will talk about the functionality of one of the modules which is called self-service. And this specific chapter is dedicated to common configuration elements. And common configuration elements are those elements that you will be using to build dynamic screens. These common configurations are defined under Settings menu. So if you log on like an administrator, you will be able to get to this option. And let's look at a few of them. First, let's look at the object which is called fields. So what is the fields? Fields are the elements that are used for dynamic UIs, such as tax forms or service request. When you define your tax form, you need to define the lines that compose this tax form, or when you define a service request, you need to define the fields which will appear in the service request. And we are using object field to reference from this end. For example, let's look at account number. So the field account number has a field name, it has a description, and description is something which will be presented as the label of this field in the UI, right? It has a data type, and data type can be obviously text or character or currency, and so on. So if the data type is the text, the attributes will be length and field length. However, if you change the attribute, the data type for a different definition, for example, a number, you will see that there are additional attributes of this element, obviously, right? So if your account number is defined as the number, then you need to specify the length and precision, right? Hint is the text that will appear on the UI and the right side from the actual field. The field detailed description are to explain what this field is all about, and the help field will appear on the tooltip when you put your cursor on the field and the generated UI. So the product comes with a set of predefined fields, and you can see these fields because they have the owner of Oracle Tax Self-Service, and if the field belongs to the product, you cannot change it. However, you can use it, or you can define your own fields. The next element that I want to show you is a lookup. And what is lookup? Lookup basically defines the list of fields. For example, account type. So when you show account type on the UI, you don't want it to be a free format field. You want it to be represented as a drop-down, and then your field should reference a data type which is called a lookup, and in lookup you define the valid values for the fields. For example, if the lookup code is account type, then the valid values will be checking and saving. You can define your states. Let's see. So for the lookup code of state, you can define all different states that you want to be shown in the drop-down when, for example, customer enters his address, and this will be the states available in his address. So the next important field is the validation rule. And validation rule, you can specify it on your field, and it will contain the basic validation of the fields. For example, Social Security format, right? So it's the field that it's a validation rule that belongs to the product, so you can see that the values are protected. But what you can do here, you can specify the regular expression that validates this field, and then later on when user enters the field, enters the data, this field, Social Security number, if it has validation rule attached to that, will be validated according to this regular expression. Okay. Another usage of validation rule is Oracle Policy Automation. If you specify rule type as the Oracle Policy Automation, you can reference OP rule that will be called. But the important things to remember is that validation rule can be defined on the field level, and when you define the rule on the field level, you specify the regular expression to validate the field, or validation rule can be defined on the form level. And if you define validation rule on the form level, you will define the OP rule, which will be called when this form gets validated, and then the entire form will be sent to this OP rule for the validation. Okay? And very important attribute is the message. So the messages are largely used throughout the system. And there are three types of the messages. The messages can be errors, they can be warning, or they can be information. So what messages allow us to do? They allows us, first of all, display different errors or the warning that are coming either from the backend or from the actual self-service, and we also use them to compose different information that we are using in self-service. For example, let's look at the error message, right? So self-service error issue was detected, right? So this message will be shown when there is an error, when somebody submits the service request and it contains a static text. However, messages can be much more comprehensive. And we are using the messages when we show enrollment summary, or when we show taxpayer information, when we show account information, when we show alerts, when we show validation rules. For example, this message is for the payment, right? Is probably the message which is displayed when you show account information, right? And look at the text. It says the payment of 1 received on 2 will be posted on your account. So this is the actual message text, and these are the message parameters, right? So how the message parameter works. You define your message parameters in the message sequence. So parameter number 1 is the currency, and parameter number 2 is the date. So for example, the backend sends the information about the payments, right? So it will pass the XML, and XML will contain message number, for example 11005. It will contain the amount, for example $130, right? And it will contain the second parameter, for example January 1st 2014, right? So, and what the system will do, it will find the message number 11005. It will find this text, right? It will take parameter number 1 and parameter number 2, and it will substitute these parameters with the actual information that was specified on the XML. It will merge them into the message, and the message will be displayed, right? So using these techniques, you can define all these different texts that were shown throughout the system, or you can define different error messages. So I want to show you the examples of how this type of information is used. So for example, if we look at the system, there is an address which is already supplied with the product, and this is the format of the address for United States. So basically what this entity allows you to do, it allows you to define how the address should be shown when you show different information such as taxpayer information, right? So what you do here, you define address elements, and address element, if we look at them, they basically reference the field, right? So there are different address constituents that are defined in the product, but what you do, you reference the actual field, right, which is used to render this element. So when address is rendered on UI, the system will go, it will check which field is associated with this element, it will go to this field, it will check the definition of this field, it will check if any help or hints supposed to appear next to the address, and this is what will be used to combine the address which is shown on UI. And another important part of the address is basically what kind of message, what kind of text is displayed when the address is shown, right? So it says that the message which is used is 410, and so now let's go and check what does message 410 shows. So if I go back to the messages, and if I look for the message 410, here it is. So it says that the parameters of this message are defined as text, right? And one parameter is defined as a lookup, and one parameter is defined as the number. And if we want to understand how all this information is used in the system, we can check the taxpayer information. For example, I want to log on as Billy Cyrus. I want to go and to check the taxpayer information. So taxpayer information contains the address, and you can see that the mailing address is displayed according to the information that was set up, right? This is the message parameter number 1, number 2, this is date, and this is zip, right? And if I say edit, the system shows us the information that we defined when we defined the message. So again, when you define your address, it shows according to the information. You can enter it according to the address definition, and when the system shows the actual address, when it displays the actual address, according to this message that is defined on address configuration. This is the basic explanation of the basic elements that we are using when we're building the dynamic UIs, and we will explain you will see more about these elements once you look at the other chapters that are actually using this information. So that concludes our chapter about common configuration elements, and you'll see the actual usage of these elements in subsequent chapters. Thank you.